Thank you, Congressman Fleming, Dr. Fleming, I should say. Obviously, a very important issue that's important to all values voters is the issue of marriage. There have been a number of critical decisions over this last year regarding marriage. We've assembled an impressive panel of experts to talk about marriage in America, the road ahead. So coming now to moderate this panel, would you please welcome the Senior Fellow of Policy Studies at the Family Research Council and the author of the book Outrage: How Gay Activists and Liberal Judges Are Trashing Democracy to Redefine Marriage. Please welcome Peter Sprigg.
Thank you. I'll ask the members of my panel to come on out on stage and join me here where your name card is. I'm going to introduce them individually when I get to each of them one at a time. The institution of marriage has been under stress for at least 2 generations now. The sexual revolution took sexual relations out of the sacred precincts of the marital bedroom and into any bedroom, and increasingly into the public square itself. No-fault divorce undermined the permanence of the marriage bond. Cohabitation has increasingly become a substitute for marriage. But the severing of the once powerful bonds which linked sex and procreation to marriage has now reached its culmination in the effort to change the very definition of marriage itself. The idea that marriage is intrinsically, by definition, the union of one man and one woman, which would have been taken for granted for almost the entire history of Western civilization, has gone from being universally self-evident to being, in the eyes of many, including some federal judges, utterly incomprehensible. Last year, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling in the Windsor case, striking down the federal definition of marriage as the union of a man and a woman for all purposes under federal law, according to the Defense of Marriage Act. But they dodged the issue of state definitions of marriage by not issuing a ruling on the merits regarding California's Prop 8. Subsequent challenges, state by state across the country, however, have used the rationale of the Windsor ruling to challenge the laws and, in many cases, constitutional amendments adopted by the people. Each of our guests today offers a unique perspective on the irreplaceable institution of marriage. And I'm going to turn first to Eric Teetsel. Eric Teetsel is executive director of the Manhattan Declaration, a call of Christian conscience on life, marriage, and religious liberty, which was founded by Chuck Colson in 2009. He works to make sure that the Declaration serves not only as a manifesto, but a movement which continues to inform the public about these issues. Eric attended Wheaton College. He worked at Colorado Christian University before coming to Washington to serve with the Values and Capitalism Project at the American Enterprise Institute. Last year, Eric was one of several young leaders profiled in the New York Times under the headline, "Young Opponents of Gay Marriage Undaunted by Battle Ahead." Please welcome Eric Teetsel. Eric, I'm going to start with a broad question for you. Why does marriage matter to society?
How much time do you have? I was thinking about this panel today and realized that it was 5 years ago this Sunday that Chuck Colson tasked Robbie George with authoring the first draft of what came to be known as the Manhattan Declaration, as you said, a manifesto, but really a wake-up call to the church, to be the church on the most important issues of our time, life, marriage, and religious liberty. And I thought I would read just a bit of what the Manhattan has to say about this question. It describes marriage as nothing less than the crowning achievement of God's creation. Marriage is the first institution of human society. Indeed, it is the institution on which all other human institutions have their very foundation. And vast human experience confirms that marriage is both the original and most important institution for sustaining the health, welfare, and education of all persons in a society. Marriage matters because it's good, and it plays a central role in God's story for the world in which we live. That fact, I think, is underscored by, what for me is one of the coolest realities about Scripture's testimony when it comes to the question of marriage. The Bible begins with a wedding in a garden between Adam and Eve, and it ends with a wedding in a city between Christ and his church.
Very good. Now, the millennial generation has seen high levels of divorce in their parents' generation, yet graduating high school students, according to surveys, continue to tell us overwhelmingly that they desire marriage to be part of their future. In spite of the poor modeling they may have seen of marriage in many cases, what does this desire tell us about the powerful good that marriage can be?
Well, it tells us something. I suppose it tells us that things could be worse. There's something deep inside, even this generation that has no idea what marriage is, that has no idea why marriage matters, that has no understanding or conception of why the biblical meaning of marriage should have anything to do with our law's understanding of marriage. That yet they still, somewhere deep down inside, have this sense that I should get married, that that's a good thing. Unfortunately, they're not getting married. I think the statistic that just came out from Pew is that just under half of young adults between the ages of 25 and 34 are married. That's a fourfold increase from what it was in 1960. So my parents' generation and the generation before them has not exactly left a legacy of marriage for my generation to understand and grab onto. And that's why I'm happy to be part of a movement that's trying to rebuild the foundations of marriage. You know, the same-sex marriage movement is only the latest symptom in what has been a decades-long breakdown in our understanding of the role of marriage and family in society. So we got to start there. We need to fight against that, but ours is a much broader project.
Great. Tell people the website for the Manhattan Declaration.
Yeah, thanks. The Manhattan Declaration can be found online, www.manhattandeclaration.org. We're also all over Facebook and Twitter, too. We hope you'll read it, sign it, and share it with others.
This is something that everybody can sign. The more signatures that are on it, the better it is, the more powerful a statement it makes to our society. So I encourage you to go to that site and sign the Manhattan Declaration. Well, let me move on to our next guest, who is a member of Congress. Representative Vicky Hartzler is in her second term representing Missouri's 4th Congressional District here in Washington. She previously served 3 terms as a member of the Missouri House of Representatives. She and her husband Lowell own a company that sells farm equipment and live with their daughter on a working farm in Cass County, Missouri. And I just want to mention personally, I still remember so well the first time I met Mrs. Hartzler was here at the Values Voter Summit, and it was before she'd been elected to Congress, and she was selling or promoting a book she had written on Christians running for office called, if I get this right, Running God's Way, something like that. And so it's really great to see someone like this having put those principles into action and being elected to Congress. Now, give her a hand, yeah. Now, the key question, one of the key questions about marriage is, what is marriage? But a second key question is, who decides? Missouri is one of 30 states that amended its constitution to define marriage as the union of one man and one woman. You were very active in that campaign back in 2004, I believe, was it? Tell us why you thought it was important for the people of your state to act in defense of marriage.
Well, that was right after the 2004 Supreme Court decision in Massachusetts, where a few unelected, unaccountable judges overruled the will of the people in Massachusetts and said, we know better what the definition of marriage is, and we don't care what you think about it. And so Missouri's legislature, as well as many other state assemblies across our country, were very proactive in putting a measure on our ballot for the voters to decide what we wanted in marriage. And I was asked to be the spokesperson for that campaign and ended up helping with that. And it was quite an experience because our election was in August. I believe there was 10 other states that had their election in November. And so Missouri became the focal point for the entire national debate at that time. And even though that we were outspent 22-1, and even though the other professional organizations who were opposed to the amendment flooded our states with professional offices and staff, and we were just a grassroots volunteer organization, our voters, our citizens came out that November and we spoke loud and clear with 71% of the vote that we think it's wise public policy for marriage to be between a man and a woman. And I'm very thrilled.
Now, in the last year, we've seen a number of federal judges vote to strike down these state definitions of marriage. This has raised concerns for a lot of us about the balance of power both between the states and the federal government and between the three branches of government. So as a legislator, as a member of the legislative branch, what do you think about the role these judges are playing in this question? Are they taking authority that doesn't really belong to them?
Absolutely. According to the Constitution, the judicial branch is supposed to interpret law or enforce law. It's up to the legislative branch to legislate laws. And as far as that goes, the executive branch is supposed to execute laws. And we need to get back to all of that. And certainly in the case of people across this country speaking like Missouri has, the people have the right to determine these policies. That's why we acted 10 years ago, put it in our Constitution, and that's where it needs to stay, with the power of the people, not some unelected judges somewhere. Now, Missouri's law is being challenged, as has been all across this country. And we had our first hearing, it was yesterday, where that was heard in court. And I just am praying and hoping that Missouri's judges will rule like Judge Feldman down in Louisiana that said social decisions should be decided by the people and not by judges. So we're hoping for that.
Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, last year the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a portion of the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, which had required the federal government to recognize only the union of one man and one woman as marriages. The Obama administration since then has been very aggressive in pushing this recognition, the widest possible, the broadest possible interpretation of that ruling. But several pieces of legislation have been introduced in Congress seeking to address some of the concerns people have about religious liberty and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. There's a couple that I'm co-sponsoring that I think are very important. The first is the Marriage and Religious Liberty Act, and it hopes to address some of the concerns of the federal government coming after private businesses or nonprofit organizations and withholding federal support for them. And that law specifically says the federal government cannot in any way harm an individual or a business or an entity because they uphold marriage. And that means they can't withhold loans or grants or contracts or other federal programs that perhaps that business would be interested in. And then there's another bill that deals just with foster care and adoption system. And I've worked on adoption issues for many, many years, and I'm a strong supporter of that. We have 400,000 children right now in foster care, with about 25%, which would be around 100,000, that are available for adoption and wanting a home. Yet we have the federal government going after some private foster care and adoption agencies and withholding their tax-exempt status or their contracts with the government because they simply believe that those children deserve to be with a father and a mother. And that is wrong. And so we have introduced the Child Welfare Provider Inclusion Act, which would prevent the federal government from being able to do that and would make sure that every agency that wants to see these kids get in homes have that opportunity without federal interference.
Great, thank you. Now, our next guests, Aaron and Melissa Klein, are not like our other panelists. They are not elected officials, not theologians, not policy analysts. They are or were the owners of a bakery in Gresham, Oregon called Sweet Cakes by Melissa. Now, see, they already know you. I did some research in preparing for this. I went on the Nexus News search engine. I put in Sweet Cakes by Melissa and searched for the last 2 years. And the very first article that came up was 2 years ago. The Oregonian, a leading paper in Portland, Oregon, said this in their travel section. They said, farther east on Main in Gresham, Oregon, a small strip mall is home to Sweet Cakes by Melissa. Known for its complex wedding cakes, Melissa's also has filled cupcakes in flavors like red velvet and cinnamon chocolate ribbon. Indulge, you've earned it. Now, unfortunately, the next 89 news articles about them were not quite as flattering because when they returned to the news, it was because they had joined the growing number of Christian business people who have faced the choice of sacrificing either their conscience or their business in the face of demands by homosexual activists and now by the state of Oregon that they participate in the celebration of a same-sex wedding by making a customized cake for that event. Now, before we talk about this case that you're involved in, can you, one or both of you, tell us about the process of designing and producing a wedding cake, the process that you use? This is not just a matter of pulling a cake off a shelf, is it?
No, it's definitely not. With our business, everything we do is from scratch, and it's more than just throwing ingredients, into the oven and throwing frosting on it. For a wedding, we sit down with the bride and groom, or sometimes the mother and the bride, and for me personally, when I would sit down with them, I just would want to know everything about her wedding, and I'd want to know about her flowers, her dress, the centerpieces, her colors, the way her hair was going to be. I wanted to see her ring. I even would talk about, where are you going on your honeymoon? And I would use all this information to help me design the perfect cake that reflected them as a couple. Sorry, I don't mean to get emotional. It just really touches my heart. But anyways, I would sit with them, and I would sit and sketch up designs, and sometimes it would take, several different designs until we got the perfect cake that just matched them. And sometimes it would take 2 hours of sitting in a cake tasting. And if they chose me to do their cake, I'm sorry. Sure. I would just feel so honored to be able to be a part of such an amazing, special day. I believe. Sorry, you want to go?
That's all right. Well, Aaron, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just like to add, even before we opened our storefront, we had our pastor, our church out. We actually dedicated the shop. I mean, the work that was done, everything was to the glory of God. I can't I can't say it more forcefully than I mean, really what it came down to was she has a God-given talent to create a work of art, to celebrate a union between two people, and to use that in a manner that would be, you know, in the face of what the Bible says it should be. I just couldn't in good conscience agree to do it.
Now, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, give him a hand for that. Now, I do have to tell you that unfortunately there's ongoing litigation over this situation, so the Kleins are somewhat limited in what they can say about the actual incident, the actual interaction with the people who complained about them. But you were not only attacked on social media and in the press, but eventually legal action was taken against you. Can you tell us just a little bit about what they did and what the state has done and what you were forced to do as a result?
Up to this point, the girls filed a complaint with the Bureau of Labor and Industry. That has now gone into the process where they have found evidence that suggests that we discriminated. We're actually, like you say, facing litigation at this point. Should be within the next couple of weeks as far as a court date. You know, in the end, the boycotting, the harassment, and I mean, quite frankly, they didn't just harass us, they harassed the other wedding vendors that we did business with. It cut off our referral system. We had to shut the shop down. Melissa now does very limited cakes out of our house. I mean, we're facing in excess of $150,000 in damages for this, just for simply standing by my First Amendment rights. On top of that, the state has actually told me that merely speaking about this could be construed as advertising, that I would discriminate and could be fined additionally for that.
Talk to us about your conscience. You made reference to your conscience. How does it make you feel to be basically told that you have to violate your conscience on this issue?
For me personally, to be told they're going to force me to convey a message other than what I want to convey, I mean, it flies in the face of the Constitution. It's a violation of my conscience. It's a violation of my religious freedom, and I mean, it's horrible to see your own government doing this to you.
Okay. How can we pray for you going forward?
Well, first of all, we have 5 kids. We've suffered some financial hardships because of this. God's been good. He's provided up to this point. Pray for our attorneys. We've got an excellent team of attorneys that's fighting this. We plan to appeal any decision that would be contrary to, you know, standing up for our religious freedom. Pray for wisdom for them. And, you know, honestly, the Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor and Industry, Brad Avakian, has made it clear at this point that he believes we have broken the law. He said we have religious freedom, but don't have the right to break the law. And in saying that, he's already declared our guilt. I'd say pray for him, pray for the changing of his mind.
I should have asked this earlier, but I just wanted to clarify for our audience. This is not really about sexual orientation per se, is that correct? You have served gay and lesbian customers in the past.
The girl that came in was actually a return customer. She came in, she bought and paid for her mother's wedding cake from us. She returned wanting a wedding cake from us. It's never been about sexual orientation.
It's about marriage. So.
It's about marriage and the event.
All right. Let's give a big hand to Aaron and Melissa Klein.
how that makes me feel.
Well, thank you. Well, our final guest has a tough act to follow.
I expect that same ovation.
Dr. Jerry Johnson is the president and CEO of the National Religious Broadcasters, located here in the Washington, D.C. area. Their mission is to advance biblical truth, to promote media excellence, and to defend free speech. Dr. Johnson previously served as president of Criswell College in Dallas, Texas. In addition to his work in education, he has also pastored churches in Texas and Colorado. Dr. Johnson is married, and he and his wife have 2 children. Please welcome Dr. Jerry Johnson. Now, Dr. Johnson, since you are involved in the media and broadcasting, my first question I wanted to ask you is, what role do you think the media has played in this campaign to redefine marriage?
Well, it's huge, and I think we should go back to 2008, probably, when the president was elected the first time. In his speech, you should remember, in the inauguration speech, he listed rich, poor, white, black, and then he inserted gay and straight in there, and that was huge, and the media picked up on that. Somewhere along in his presidency, he switched from gay and straight to LGBT. It's a very interesting switch. I don't know if anyone's marked that switch. It never says gay and straight anymore. Now it's LGBT. Straight's not even in that mix. That's an interesting point. So, but you've got 5. And I just looked on a website the other day. There are about 20 different sexual identities, orientations now that some would want to identify. But the mainstream media keeps repeating this, writing it into scripts, repeating the lingo, and it is affecting us. That's the thing I want to say. Be very careful how you talk about these issues, because part of the debate is in the language itself.
Right. Now, what role can Christian media play in publicizing the case for the natural definition of marriage?
Well, we can do a better job than we've been doing. And one of the things we talk about is when it comes to the First Amendment, use it or lose it. And so if you're on radio or television, or if you have a blog, or if you do a podcast or YouTube, talk about this. If you're a pastor, preach about this. Talk about natural marriage, traditional marriage, historic marriage. I think that's very important. You could also come to my panel discussion tomorrow, because we'll be talking about the fact that in Canada, sermons are turned in on Wednesday for editing.
Wow.
And we have a Canadian that'll be here tomorrow to talk about it, a major broadcaster. And on Thursday, they can make the corrections, and on Friday, if they haven't changed it, they run last week's sermons. And so this is right next door, and we have not got to live under some kind of self-imposed Sharia law on this issue. We have the First Amendment freedom to speak and to exercise, and we should use it.
Very good. Thank you. Now, I mentioned that before coming to NRB, you were president of Criswell College. You've had a career in higher education. So my last question for you there is, what do you think we need to be doing to educate the younger generation about the importance of marriage, and to equip young Christians to defend marriage in the public square?
Well, we just have to challenge a lot of these assumptions. And so, young people always want to be on the cutting edge and with it. And so one of the main arguments you'll hear is, you don't want to be on the wrong side of history. Well, let's just take that for a moment. It's not about history. It's about the future. They're not talking about history. They're talking about what they want the future to be. Or maybe they're talking about this month or this year or the last 10 years. History is on our side. The last hundreds of years of American history, our culture has recognized traditional, natural marriage. That has been the cultural norm. And you go back beyond that, Judeo-Christian history. And I take a cue from the Apostle Paul, in in Romans 1, he didn't quote the Leviticus passage we often hear so often. Yeah, it's true, it's there, but Paul went back to Genesis 1, and Paul said, you know, this choice is a rejection of the Creator and the created order, the natural order. It's, when you use the word natural marriage, that's Genesis 1. He made the male and female, and so we're talking about thousands of years of Judeo-Christian heritage here. And what we do know is that cultures who've chosen this path in the past, have not ended well. And the future is what they're talking about, not the past. And so I think we've got to be biblical, we've got to be clear, we've got to be practical, and above all things, we do have to talk about it. And let's talk about protecting natural marriage.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. Please give a big hand to our panel. Thank you.